Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for today's edition of the Daf Yomi, from wherever you're joining me. So let's dive straight in. So Shevuot Daf 33 Amud A. But the second set of witnesses still stands available to testify. So what loss did the first set cause the plaintiff when they denied knowledge of the matter? Ravina said, what are we dealing with here? We are dealing with a case where the two witnesses in the second set were relatives to their wives. So what does that mean? Keruvin Mishon Sehem. There are two basic explanations of this matter. According to Rashi, this is a case where the two witnesses are related to each other through their wives. E.g., the two men are married to two sisters. According to Rabbi Hananel, this is a case where the witnesses are related to one of the litigants through their wives. If one administered an oath on two pairs of witnesses, and both are fit to testify, and one pair denied knowledge of the matter, and the other pair denied knowledge of the matter, the first pair is exempt from the oath of testimony, since they rely on the fact that the testimony of the second pair will enable the plaintiff to collect their debt. The result is that the defendant is not liable to pay based on the testimony of the first pair. If the witnesses of the second pair were related to the plaintiff, or to the defendant through their wives, and the wives were dying, the first pair is also liable, and the second pair was not fit to testify when the first pair denied knowledge of the matter. This is the case even though very soon when the women die, the second group will be fit to testify. If the second pair denies knowledge of the matter after their wives die, they are obligated to take an oath of testimony in accordance with the conclusion of the Gemara explained by Rabbi Hananel. Shevuot 10:15. At the time of the denial of the first set of witnesses, the two witnesses in the second set were married to two sisters, and the brother-in-law of unfit to serve as witnesses together. Therefore, the claim of the plaintiff is entirely dependent upon the testimony of the first set of witnesses. And the sisters who were the wives of the witnesses in the second set were moribund. What does that mean? Agosus. The halacha is that one is considered alive until his death, and even one who is on his deathbed is alive. Nothing may be done to hasten his death. The testimony of witnesses who saw him on his deathbed is insufficient evidence for a rabbinical court to declare him dead and permit his wife to remarry. Unless you say that since presumably the majority of individuals who are moribund will die very soon, and therefore these two witnesses are fit to testify together, therefore the Tana teaches that since now in any event the wives had not yet died, their husbands remain unfit to testify together. In a case when the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify, if you do not come and testify on my behalf that I have in possession of so-and-so a deposit and an outstanding loan. If the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify on my behalf that I have a deposit, an outstanding loan, a stolen item, or a lost item in the possession of so-and-so, and they denied knowledge of the matter and said to him, by our oath, we do not know any testimony on your behalf, they are liable for taking only one false oath of testimony. But they said, by our oath, we do not know any testimony that you have a deposit, an outstanding loan, a stolen item, and a lost item in the possession of so-and-so. They are liable for taking a false oath of testimony for each and every category. And that's in the Rambam Sefer Fly, Shevuot 9:15. And a stolen item and a lost item, and they lied and reply, on our oath we do not know any testimony on your behalf. They are liable for taking only one false oath of testimony. But if they lied and reply, on our oath we do not know that you have in the possession of so-and-so a deposit, and an outstanding loan, and a stolen item, and a lost item, they are liable for each and every one of the components of the claim. It is as though they took a separate oath with regard to each of the details of the claim. In a case when the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify, if you do not come and testify that I have in the possession of so-and-so a deposit of wheat and barley and spelt. If the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administered an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify that I have wheat, barley, and spelt in the possession of so-and-so, and they denied knowledge of the matter and said, by our oath, we do not know any testimony on your behalf, but they are liable for taking only one false oath of testimony. But if they said, by our oath we do not know any testimony that you have wheat, barley and spelt in the possession of so-and-so, they are liable for taking a false oath of testimony for each and every category. And that's from the Rambam, Sefer Aflah, Shevuot 9:16. And they lied and reply, on our oath we do not know any testimony on your behalf. They are liable for taking only one false oath of testimony. But if they lied and reply, on our oath we do not know any testimony on your behalf, that you have in the possession of so-and-so wheat and barley and spelt, they are liable for each and every one of the components of the claim. In a case where the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify, if you do not come and testify on my behalf that I have in the possession of so-and-so an outstanding payment for damage, or an outstanding payment for half the damage, sheyesh li biyad poloni nezek v'chatzi nezek. If the plaintiff said to the witnesses, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify, that I have in the possession of so-and-so an unpaid double payment of the principal, or payment of 4 or 5 times the principal, and they deny knowledge of the matter, they are liable for taking a false oath of testimony because the denial included the principal, which is a monetary payment. They are not liable for the denial of knowledge with regard to the additional payment of the fine. Likewise, if he administered an oath to witnesses concerning their refusal to testify that so-and-so raped or seduced his daughter, and they deny knowledge of the matter, they are liable for taking a false oath of testimony with regard to the monetary payments for humiliation and degradation, but not with regard to the payment of the fine. Shevuot 9:5, which the owner paid for damage caused by his innocuous ox going on another animal, or with regard to an outstanding payment of double the principal that a thief must pay the owner of the stolen item, or with regard to an outstanding payment of 4 or 5 times the principal that a thief pays when he stole a sheep or an ox, respectively, and then slaughtered or sold it, or in a case where the plaintiff said, I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify, if you do not come and testify that so-and-so raped my daughter. A man who rapes an unmarried girl or a young woman between the ages of 3 and 12.5 years is obligated by Torah to marry her, and it is prohibited for him to divorce her. He is obligated to pay a fine for the rape, see Deuteronomy 22:29, to pay damages assessed based on the halachot of personal injury. The marriage is subject to a consent and that of her father. Or if he seduced my daughter, a man who persuades an unmarried young woman between the ages of 12 and 12.5 to engage in sexual intercourse with him is called a seducer. See Exodus 22:16. He is liable by Torah law to pay her father for the humiliation that he caused her, and pay a fine equivalent in value to a virgin's dowry of 200 dinars. The seduction of a girl under the age of 12 falls under the category of rape, as the consent of a minor is halachically irrelevant. Or he seduced my daughter, or that my son struck me, Hakani Bani. It is prohibited by Torah law, see Exodus 21:15, for a son or daughter to strike his father or mother. One who violates the prohibition and draws blood or causes abuse is liable to be executed by strangulation. One who strikes his father and mother but does not draw blood or cause abuse is liable to pay 5 types of indemnity for an injury. This must be a case where the son struck the father but did not wound him, as had the son wounded him, he would be liable to be executed by Torah law, and all those who are liable to be executed are exempt from payment. Or that another injured me. One who injures another is liable to pay him 5 types of indemnity: damage, pain, medical costs, loss of livelihood, and humiliation. If the aggressor pays his debt with land, he must pay from the land of superior quality. This is in the case of all payments of damages. Here too, as in the case of a burning pile of grain, it must be explained that the injury was inflicted on Yom Kippur, and it was an injury with a wound for which one is liable to receive karet. Although he desecrated the sanctity of the day, he is liable to pay, says Rashi. Or that he set my stack of grain on fire on Yom Kippur. If any of these cases the witnesses took an oath falsely denying any knowledge of the matter on behalf of the plaintiff, these witnesses are liable for taking a false oath of testimony. A dilemma was raised before the sages. In a case where one administers an oath to witnesses concerning a fine, if they do not come and testify that one performed an action that renders liable to pay a sum fixed by the Torah as a penalty for that action, what is the halacha? Is it like any other case of an oath administered to witnesses in monetary matters or not? The Gemara refines the dilemma. According to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, do not raise a dilemma, as he says, in a case where one performs an action in the presence of witnesses for which he is liable to pay a fine, and before the witnesses testified he admitted his liability, even though the principle is one who admits that he is liable to pay a fine is exempt from paying the fine. The witnesses shall come and testify and render the one who performed the action liable to pay the fine. In his opinion, payment of the fine is dependent upon that testimony, and therefore if they lie, they are liable for taking a false oath of testimony. When should you raise a dilemma? Raise it according to the opinion of the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon. As they say, one who admits he is liable to pay a fine is exempt, even if afterward witnesses came. In a case of one who admits that he is liable to pay a fine, and witnesses came thereafter to testify to his liability, if his confession was in court, and before the judges he is exempt from payment of the fine, and according to the opinion of the rabbis, the Torah writes that he is exempt from payment of the fine, in that case, only if through his admission he rendered himself liable to pay the principles. And the Rambam say from the Zichen, Hilchik Geneva 3:8, Choshen Mishpat 348, and testified to his liability. In the case, his admission is one where the plaintiff demanded that the witnesses testify on his behalf before the defendant admitted knowledge of the fine. The Gemara seeks to clarify, and the rabbis who expressed their opinion there that one who admits he is liable to pay a fine is exempt, even afterward witnesses can come. In accordance with whose opinion do they hold? If we say they are holding in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, cited in 32a, doesn't he say, a matter that causes financial loss is considered to have monetary value with regard to the oath of testimony. Witnesses who testify concerning a fine also cause financial loss, and if the individual does not admit his liability, he will be liable to pay the fine based on their testimony. Rather, apparently the rabbis there hold in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis here, who say a matter that causes financial loss is not considered to have monetary value. It is according to that opinion that the dilemma is raised. What is halacha in the case of witnesses to a fine? Does one say, since if the one liable to pay the fine admits liability, he is exempt from paying the fine? The witnesses taking the oath denying knowledge of the matter is not denying a monetary claim, and therefore he is not liable for taking a false oath of testimony. So what's the footnote? In a case where one administers an oath to witnesses who know a testimony relevant to a fine and they deny knowledge of the matter, the witnesses are exempt from liability for taking a false oath of testimony. The reason is that had the defendant admitted his liability to pay the fine before they would provide their testimony, he would have been exempt from payment of the fine. Therefore, it is not the testimony of the witnesses alone that would have rendered the individual liable to pay the fine. Rather, it is their testimony in conjunction with his denial of liability to pay. Shevuot 9:4. Or perhaps, since now in any event he has not yet admitted liability, payment of the fine is dependent upon the testimony of these witnesses, and is considered a monetary matter in which they are liable for taking a false oath of testimony. The Gemara suggests, come and hear proof from the Mishnah to resolve the dilemma. I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify if you do not come and testify on my behalf that I have in my possession of so and so an unpaid payment for damage, and likewise unpaid payment for half the damage. But in those cases, witnesses can be held liable for the oath of testimony. But isn't payment for half the damage payment of a fine? So it's a footnote. Chazinezek nasa. Half the damage is a fine. The payment of half the damage caused falls into the category of payment of a fine, with the exception of payment of half the damage for damage caused by purpose inadvertently propelled by the foot of one's animal. In that case, although it is a monetary payment for damage as a subcategory of the primary category of trampling, there is halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai that one pays only half the damage. Say from the Zichen K. Mammon 12237, Shulchan Aruch Mishpat 389:18. In general, liability to pay half the damage applies in cases of damage that fall into the primary category of goring, i.e. cases where an animal owned by an individual attacks and injures others. If it is an innocuous animal that has not yet established a pattern of aggression and causes damage, the owner pays half the damage. The Amoraim disagree whether that payment is payment of a fine, and fundamentally the owner should have been exempt from payment, and the Torah penalized him to caution him to be more vigilant regarding his animal, or whether it is a monetary payment for the damage caused, and fundamentally the owner should have been liable to remunerate the victim for the full cost of the damage, since the animal was not forewarned. The Torah exempts him from payment of 1/2 of the total damage and deems him liable to pay only half the damage. The Gemara rejects this proof. The Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of one who says that payment of half the damage is monetary restitution and not a fine. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to one who says that payment of half the damage is monetary restitution, but according to the one who says that payment of half the damage is payment of a fine, what can be said? The Gemara answers, in his opinion, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the plaintiff demands that the witness testify with regard to liability to pay half the damage caused by pebbles inadvertently propelled by the foot of a walking animal. As we learn this halacha through tradition transmitted to Moses from Sinai, a payment of half the damage in that case is monetary restitution, not a fine. Therefore, no proof may be cited from the Mishnah with regard to liability for taking a false oath of testimony concerning a fine. The Gemara suggests, come and hear proof from the Mishnah to resolve the dilemma. I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify. If you do not come and testify that I have in the possession of so-and-so an unpaid payment of double the principal, for which the witnesses are also liable for taking a false oath of testimony. But isn't that a payment of a fine? The Gemara responds, the liability for taking a false oath of testimony in that case is not due to the denial of knowledge of the matter with regard to the fine, or the liability is due to the denial of knowledge of the matter with regard to the principal, which is a full-fledged monetary payment. The Gemara cites another proof from the Mishnah. I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify if you do not come and testify that I have in the possession of so-and-so payment of 4 or 5 times the principal, which is a fine. The Gemara answers, there are two liabilities due to the denial of knowledge of the matter with regard to the principal, not due to the fine. The Gemara cites another proof from the continuation of the Mishnah. I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify if you do not come and testify that so-and-so raped my daughter or he seduced my daughter. Isn't the payment for rape and seduction a fine of 50 seller? The Gemara rejects this. There the liability of witnesses is due to the denial of knowledge of the matter with regard to payment for humiliation and compensation for degradation and of the value of the young woman resulting from the rape or the seduction. Those are categorized as monetary restitution, not as fines. The Gemara asks, according to this understanding, what is the Tana teaching with the multiplicity of cases in the Mishnah? All the cases in the Mishnah of monetary restitution, the Gemara answers, in the first clause the Tana teaches us one novel element, and in the last clause the Tana teaches us one novel element. In the first clause the Tana teaches us one novel element, that liability to pay for half the damage caused by pebbles is monetary restitution, not a fine. In the latter clause the Tana teaches us one novel element. I administer an oath to you concerning your refusal to testify if you do not come and testify that he set my stack of grain on fire in Yom Kippur. What does this halacha serve to exclude? It serves to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Nehunya ben Hakana, as is taught in a Baita. Rabbi Nehunya ben Hakana would deem Yom Kippur like Shabbat. Yom Kippur Shabbat. One who injures another on Shabbat through performance of a prohibited labor is exempt from payment for the damage caused. Based on the principle, he receives the greater of the two punishments. He receives only the court-imposed death penalty of stoning. By Nehunya ben Hakana holds that since one who injures another through performance of a prohibited labor on Yom Kippur is liable to receive karet, the same principle applies and he receives the greater punishment of karet and exempt from monetary payment. The rabbis hold that this principle applies only in cases of court-imposed capital punishment and not those involving punishments at the hand of heaven. Furthermore, one who violates a prohibition for which one is liable to receive karet is exempt from karet if he is flogged with regard to payment of damages. Just as in the case of one who intentionally desecrates Shabbat, he is liable to receive the death penalty and therefore exempt from liability for payment of damage that is caused while desecrating Shabbat. So too, in the case of one who intentionally desecrates Yom Kippur, he is liable to receive the death penalty and is therefore exempt from liability for payment for damage that is caused while desecrating Yom Kippur. The Tana of the Mishnah disagrees. The Gemara says, "Come here, proof from a Abai to resolve the dilemma. I administer an oath to you concerning your feud to testify that if you come and testify on my behalf, that so and so slandered my daughter." So that moved on to the next onward. Thank you for listening and all the best. Bye.